Hey everyone.
Hello.
Good evening, Daniel. Good
Good
Hey, how
morning.
you doing?
morning.
I'm fine.
Good evening,
Great.
Daniel.
Yeah,
Yes.
12 hours difference. Huh? So,
Yep, 10 p.m.
but-
on the dot.
yeah. Now, I really appreciate it that you want to join us late in your evening for a special episode, Lonneke, right?
Yeah,
Design
definitely.
Thursday. Design Donderdag in Dutch. So, what are we going to do? What are we going to talk about, Lonneke?
Deneb. Yeah, how do you create the visuals that are not native and with all the freedom that you need, and then doing it in a way that you don't have to write the full code, if I understand correctly, right?
Sounds
Yeah,
good. Yeah.
yeah. We have Daniel with us, and he's the founder creator of Deneb. So
Yeah.
live from New Zealand. Huh? Great to have you here, Daniel. And yeah, we really want to give people an introduction on what Deneb is, what you can use it for, how it works, to give a little demo. But I'm also curious about your story a little bit. So if you can maybe introduce yourself first, and yeah, also how you started creating Deneb, because I think that's a nice story to share.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. It's so great to be talking with you all. And it doesn't matter what time of day it is, I always have energy to talk about visualization, Power BI for sure. So in terms of my story, I've been in my career for quite a while now, probably over 20 years. I've done a little bit of everything. So a lot of IT and operational work. So quality assurance, software development, documentation, user acceptance, those kind of things, process improvement. But I've fallen into the BI space. BI is kind of what I've gambled my career on. That was probably about 12 years ago. So I got into, through the quality assurance path, starting to lead and coordinate performance testing and improvement of the software we're developing. So what we were able to do was take lots and lots and lots of data, mine it for useful information, automate and visualize the production of that for the development teams, but also the high level management and customers, so that we could show confidence in the progress we were making. And that really kind of got me hooked. And then I took a move from there into setting up a business intelligence function for our business. We didn't really have one of those. So learning more about how a business runs, how to improve their quality of life through analytics and data, and seeing real improvement from that. And that kind of led me towards Power BI about 10 years ago. And I've kind of been sitting in there ever since, mostly in the space of architecture, transformation, the kind of back-end sort of work, and coordinating teams and initiatives to get Power BI adopted within organizations. But gradually I gravitated towards the visual end. So what I started to do was get quite frustrated by limitations. And Power BI has custom visuals, and they were always things that other people wrote. Other people produced them, and I was able to use them and consume them, but I just started to run out of options and needed to learn how to write them myself. So probably about 6 years ago, I decided to drag out all of my old web development books and relearn all that stuff and figure out how it gets into Power BI. So I guess, we're sharing my screen right now. So I guess
I'm already sharing it. Yeah.
So I'll just zoom in a little bit, actually, just so we can see. I guess the first one was the small multiple line chart. That was something that Power BI didn't have at the time. So I needed a visual that would allow me to repeat my line charts using the same scales and axes. So that was my intro into developing custom visuals. The second one was then the violin plot, which is more about visualizing distributions. So if you're familiar with the box and whisker plot, the violin plot shows the shape of the data, not just the statistics. After that, I worked on a visual called HTML content, which is actually quite a simple visual conceptually, but it allows people to write their own content using web technologies inside Power BI. So you can write measures or columns that will render inside your report. And I got contacted by quite a few people about what that was doing for them and how much time they were prepared to spend investing in this visual to produce things exactly as they wanted. And at this point, I had accumulated a reasonable amount of experience with people approaching me privately, because all of these visuals are free and open source. So I just do them in my free time, where I would get work where people wanted me to develop visuals. It was very common for companies wanted a very specific thing and were prepared to pay for it and have me consult for them. And visuals are a very, very expensive endeavor. You have to know HTML, CSS, JavaScript, but also Power BI as well. It's a big change in discipline. So whilst the BI stuff helps, it's a very big change in how you in skill set. So not everybody is able to adapt that straight away. And we would find that often people would either be interested in proceeding and had the budget to do it, or people just weren't interested. And it wasn't a very lucrative option for me. As a solo kind of freelance developer by this time, I'd gradually moved into working freelance. But I sort of learned one of the other things actually is not only do we need to produce a visual for somebody, they often wanted it to have the benefits of being certified. So when we talk about certified, that's in Power BI, it's an extra stage. So this little badge you can see on some of these visuals, you get extra benefits like being able to export through to PDF and to PowerPoint. And it also means that Microsoft has reviewed your code and has given it a stamp of approval. So that's quite important to a lot of organizations.
Yeah. And what was the moment that you thought, okay, it's a lot of work to create these custom visuals, maybe, it's not always the right fit. It's every time I do the same thing. What triggered you to go into Deneb? Because that was 3 years ago, right? Roughly, that you came up with that idea?
The journey started about 4 years ago. I've been aware of we'll maybe talk about the languages in just a sec, but Deneb is backed by 2 languages, Vega and Vega Lite. And I was aware of these as a means of producing visuals inside web tools. So we have Vega, which is a tool that's built by the University of Washington Interactive Data Lab and is an open source tool. This is what we call a visualization grammar. So it's much easier than writing code. And what you do is you tell an interpreter what you want your visual to look like. So there's some quite good examples. And I started to get quite into the idea of less code, more instruction. I could actually experiment and play without the huge turnaround of building a visual and packaging it, putting it in, but also thinking about the idea that there are people in Power BI, particularly with the HTML visuals that I built, that might be willing to do this. And then if we could put this inside a custom visual and get that visual certified by Microsoft, then any visual you built in there would have the benefits of being certified. And this was kind of a grand idea I sort of had. It was more of an inkling. So a few years ago, about 4 years, at the end of that year, so probably December 2020, I had this little prototype visual that I demonstrated at a user group. And I'd already been talking with another MVP, Kerry Kolosko, who is using the HTML content visual to produce things that were just completely mind-blowing in terms of I never thought somebody would use the visual to produce really creative designs. And I sort of thought, well, there's a whole bunch of people out there that just think differently and are prepared to do the work, but can show us as developers what to do. And Kerry reached out to me after that user group and said, that thing you're doing there, how can we make that a visual in Power BI? And I said, oh, it's kind of an idea, but okay, fine. Let's see if we can get it going.
Great.
We started with the idea of the Vega language. And if we just take a quick look at an example here, you can build all kinds of visuals. You can even write games in it. So we've got a little Pac-Man example down here. But if we start with a simple example like a bar chart, this uses a JSON structure. So we can see we've got data here, and we've got some directives here to start building things we call scales or axes, things we know about with charts. A mark is something that demonstrates, it's bound to data. So in this case, it's a bar. So it's really just about using this language to tell an interpreter how to draw, which is easier, believe it or not, than code. This bar chart is quite simple. This is Vega. If we were to just hop across very quickly this is a custom visual that you would write using Microsoft's toolkit. So this is a simple bar chart. We won't worry too much about the actual code, but we'll just whiz through and show you the kind of, just to do something simple, you need to have a lot of knowledge
Hundreds
And
of lines of code.
200,
Yeah.
300 lines.
Enormous.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
That's
It's about
scaring
900.
people away. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And these are the kind of things we had to deal with. So going back to the question, I do like to do this, sorry.
Yeah.
These languages seem much more attractive. So Vega is a big step up, but there's also one called Vega Lite, built by the same people, which is used for common scenarios and is much more friendly for newcomers and people that just need simple use cases. So we can see by the examples.
But if I just quickly look at what was in the header here, and well, also if you're scrolling down, it's not, well, these are still simple, but I believe that with Vega Lite, they're already making quite complex graphs,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
What I'll do just very quickly is I'll just jump into that bar chart example, and we can see just how much simpler it is.
Oh, wow.
Once we've got our data,
that part
we only really
data.
specify it's a bar, and we have what are called encodings. So we can talk a little bit about those when we do a demo, but it's very, very simple. It's just binding data to things we know about. So this is a simpler language that business users can understand. And yes, absolutely. We've got simple examples here, but we can scroll down. We're starting to see some variety. We're seeing some things like density plots and isotype plots, advanced scatter plots with binning, bubble plots, layering, gradients, heat maps, pie charts.
I put in the bottom you see a code here, so people that are watching, and we've put a couple of questions we have for you. And the first question is, what native visual do you miss? Indeed, the first answer is a scatter plot with multiple lines, average lines and reference lines. So maybe that is also in here. And
So
this there's a whole community creating these examples, right? Which you can maybe
absolutely.
show and use in Deneb also.
Yeah, one of the most rewarding things for me personally is to see, if we go back to Vega, actually, if we go down to the bottom here, there are some new examples that have appeared. So this packed bubble chart, this serpentine timeline, and these warming stripes. These were produced by people that got into Vega through Deneb. So they've actually been able to produce these examples. This visual here was working in Power BI, and Madison, who built this, contributed it back to Vega. So Deneb users are now helping Vega users learn how to use the languages too, which is fascinating.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
So that's just a very brief intro, I guess, to the kind of things we can do.
Yeah, so you had a look at these languages, which I think the original was, is it D3 called?
D3, yeah. So
D3
is more like this
language, right? Which was even more this is D3.
Yeah, so D3 sits alongside JavaScript. So JavaScript is what you write your code in. D3 is a library to help you with making that easier. Vega sits on top of D3.
Yeah.
And Vega Lite sits on top of Vega. So you think about it like a stack. It goes all the way down.
Gets easier
what's nice about that is because it's built for the web. We have issues with the R and Python visuals in Power BI, where we can't do things like interactivity or publish to web or other kinds of things. But this works really well. So we can actually integrate the visual with Power BI's tooltips and cross-filtering and all kinds of stuff. So it actually opens up a lot of possibilities. And this is another thing the community is teaching us, just how far we can enrich our reports.
Yeah, and you can just find Deneb in the app stores. It is for free. It has full functionality. You don't have a paid version. It's you only have a free version.
It's a free and open source visual. So this is a labor of love. But I'm a big believer in the languages themselves. Vega and Vega Lite are free and open source, and they're community-facing languages. Deneb, I think it's fair that we try and do the same thing for people inside Power BI. So I think there's a lot of good commercial visuals that people can license and save a lot of time with. They've got great use cases. They do what they do very, very well. But I believe that this approach allows developers and creative people to explore and prototype and iterate and work more openly. And I think there are places for both. So I don't necessarily advocate one over the other, but I think that this is an option that I think is very powerful for some people and works very well for them. And I want to facilitate that as much as I can. And because I'm a solo developer, the community enables me so much in terms of showing me what they can do. But not only that, I mean, this is Deneb's website we have here. So it is available on App Source, and maybe when we get to the Power BI bit, I'll show you where to find it. We actually have because we're a free visual, we don't really have any kind of income. We have a few generous sponsors. We have a support page, and because support is a hard thing, unfortunately, with support, you're kind of on your own. We encourage public and community support, but we have some people that have recently nominated themselves to help the community in a more dedicated manner. So Andre, David, Greg, Ishin, Valeria, and Madison are spearheading this initiative where they're contactable on various channels and are helping people with problems. So it's awesome that there are people that are able to give their time and their expertise, and a lot of these people are doing amazing work as well, which is great.
That's really awesome. Shall we go to Power BI and can you show us the first steps? Because I think a lot of people, that's also one of the questions. So if you can,
I think we can do that.
Give us just from the start.
Yeah, we are all beginners, so
exactly.
Let's go.
We'll do a simple walkthrough, and we'll take a little narrative here. So what I'm assuming is, I don't necessarily know what I want yet. So with Power BI, we have known chart types that we can pick and choose. That's fine. And we often do have tools that let us choose. If we're doing data over time, we might want to use a line chart. And if we're doing part to whole, we may want to consider a pie chart, but possibly a bar chart is better. So there's all kinds of kind of known best practices, which is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what I'm doing here is I'm working on the scenario that I have some temperature data from New Zealand. So we're going to learn a little bit about the Southern Hemisphere. And the nearest place where I live is Christchurch, which is midway down the South Island. I'm actually a little bit over here, but my town isn't listed, so we'll go the closest we can. These are standard Power BI visuals. We have a slicer for places around New Zealand, so I can look at Auckland, which is up on the North Island, biggest city in New Zealand, Wellington, our capital, bottom of the North Island. But what we can see is we've got a simple bar chart with, average monthly temperature. We can see that our seasons are the other way around. Our winter is peaking in June, July, and August. So, but I have a lot of data. So I've done some aggregations, but I want to build a visual that lets me get some very dense info. So I have Deneb in my report, and I'm going to explore my data. But just for people that don't have it, you get custom visuals by going to get more visuals or whatever your local Power BI tells you. But ultimately, App Source is the place where visuals are published. And we're very fortunate that Deneb is a featured visual right now. It's an editor's pick, which is very kind of those folks. So it's, for the moment, it's up in the top.
Nice.
So we can click on that or we can search for it. Thank you very much, everybody, for consistently giving it 5 stars. It's a huge ego boost for me, but it's very important to know that people like the visual.
Yeah, of course.
Because one of the things about Deneb is that it is a certified visual, and that means that we can't do things like telemetry or find out things. We can't send information out. We're just not allowed to. So I don't know anything about its usage. I only know from reviews, from feedback on social media, or people that reach out to me. So I don't have a marketing team. I don't have support people. It's just me and the community, which sounds a little altruistic. But these things really help. So I can add this to the
When did the first version of Deneb came online available?
We put it, I say we a lot. I like to think it's a community. So I say
sure.
The first version went into public preview in April 2021. So back then it wasn't an app source, but I was putting it out for the community to give me some feedback because I'd incubated it for long enough, and I don't like to release things until they're ready. But I was gently encouraged by my colleagues to put it out there and get some real world feel for it. So the idea was that we'd iterate quickly. I put out a new release about once a month based on feedback with a view to getting it into app source by about November, which we did. And the goal was to always have this as a certified visual. It wasn't going to be useful, I feel, to people unless they got those benefits. So the very first submission, we got it certified. So November 2021 was when it went live in app source, but it's been out in the wild for a little bit longer. But it's been updated and maintained since then, and we've got a new release on the way very soon. And we'll use that today, hopefully, and the demo gods will be smiling on us.
Nice.
Yeah, so normally we just
Curious.
add to your report.
Yeah.
And we have this, I'll just collapse this down. So we have this little logo here, this D, which is the new logo, actually. It's a new thing. Very grateful to Kerry Kolosko for that design. That's what you'd normally see. So you'd add that to your report. Today, we're going to choose the version I've got fresh off the press. Hopefully, it's going to work well. And if it, oops, we won't replace the slicer. That's never happened before. Let's put that back. No, it doesn't let me undo. Okay, great. Let's go back to Christchurch. We messed up our map a little bit. Okay. Blank canvas. I'm going to add. So with Deneb, or whichever version you have, we add it to the canvas. It's very different to other visuals. So with other visuals, you kind of know exactly what you want to do. With this one, it's a canvas. So we have a landing page that tells us a little bit about what you need to do. But the short version is, think of Deneb like a table. So with your data, let's just turn this into a table for a second. In my data set, I've got some measures, I've got my date table, and I've got my location. So I've just got a couple of dimensions and a big fact table. This is quite a big table. It goes back to the 1800s for some of these. I'm going to add in my year month field, which is the first of the month. So this is each month, but this is a date time field, and my average temperature. So in a table, I get my column and my measure, and this is how it looks to Deneb. When I convert it back, I can see I've got a similar bucket here with those two fields in. But now I've got data, I can open up the editor. So in the top of the menu here, there's this extra option, which doesn't happen with every visual. We enable this for certain visuals. And what that lets us do is create a new user interface that's separate to the main visual. So when we open this up, we get this first page, and that allows us to either create or import a new, what we call a specification. So a specification is a set of instructions that builds a visual. Mm-hmm. And we can choose an existing template. So people who use Deneb create and share templates, and we have a lot of links on the website for those. So you can load those in directly. And we've got some links here that show us where to go for those. Or we can choose a couple of inbuilt ones. So I've got some very, very simple templates that I include just to get you started. And I'd love to have a gallery in here, but each template we add makes the visual bigger. So the Power BI visual file that comes down gets big, and we want to keep that nice and light. So these are just some really simple things. So we'll create an empty one. If we were to create a simple bar chart, templates allow us to build something that look like what we call the data roles here. So we can actually create named things that let us assign fields to. So somebody who creates a template can guide users through. We'll just use empty for now. And this is going to create a simple layout. Now, what I'll do very quickly is I'll just increase the font size here.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Yeah.
So how are we looking? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, cool. So what we have is we've got this area here on the left, which is our specification editor. This is our JSON, and this contains a Vega Lite specification. Very, very simple. Our second area is what we call the preview area. And this is our visual area on the report. So this represents the aspect ratio and size of our visual. Now, we can't change that. You have to resize it yourself. But it lets you see what your visual will look like on the canvas. And then our third area is what we call the debugging pane. So down here, we can see our data set that we get in. And we have a couple of other things as well. We have what we call signals and logs. That's a bit out of scope for today. We can zoom in. Not that that does much at the minute, but we can check that in a moment. And we can collapse this down if we need more room. So this tries to give maximum space. We only actually have this area inside Power BI to render an interface. So we have to be as efficient as we can.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have what's called the data. And this is bound to our values here. Now, in that Vega Lite example, we saw some explicit values. In Power BI, we're dynamic. So this directive here says this binds to what we call data set, which is our internal values that we send through, which we see here. And then we have what's called a layer. We're not going to do layering today, but layering is a technique that lets us put things on top of each other to build complicated layouts.
So that's also when you would like to combine different chart types in one
Yes.
visual. That
Yes,
would
if
be
you wish to
layers.
put
Yeah.
bars and lines and all kinds of things. You wish to put labels on, annotations, other things like that. You can use layering to build that up. It's quite powerful. We won't do that today just for time. But what we're going to talk about now is, so there's just a couple of things. So as I say, this is 1.7. This is slightly different to what you would see if you were to take Deneb today. So there are a couple of limitations with the JSON editing, which we're working on in 1.7. So we're going to see some things today that will be coming soon, and hopefully they won't crash. So one of the key things is
before you say the new thing, then I always have to do this little animation, because you haven't shared this before, so
that's
finally
right. So
I can use it again. Maybe I will do the video, and then you say one of the new things that's in 1.7.
Okay, so
world premiere.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, needs a proper introduction. So what's one of the new things then? Yeah.
So one of the things that we do is normally you have to refer a lot to the documentation. So the websites that we showed are very, very well documented. They tell you all about the languages. For technical reasons, it's been very hard to do things we take for granted in normal editors. So as of 1.7, we'll be able to start doing things like auto-completion. So we can now start to type in keywords, and we find shortcuts and descriptions for them. So now we have the encoding channel. The encoding binds to attributes. So channels being things like properties. So if we think about axes, X and Y, color, shape, those sort of things, and we wish to bind them to properties, we're going to start thinking about a simple visual. So I can look at the kind of channels that are available. I've got angle, color, column, detail, facet, fill. We want to look for X. So our X-axis, we're going to do it over time visual. We're going to start looking at data over time. We've got a year month field. So we can look at the field and the year month, which is a column. And what we need to think about here is what type of axis or scaling we want to use, because fields are all very different. So we're going to use temporal, which is a time-based one. Date time is temporal. We can see here the year month field is date time. What I'm also going to do is think about adding a mark, because we can't really visualize the data just yet. So let's add a mark, and let's make that type. Boxplot is currently a default that I'm working off. We don't want that in the full version. Line is a type, but let's have a look at what's available. We've got arc, area, bar, boxplot, etc. We're going to start with a line, because line charts we typically use to visualize data over time.
Yeah.
I'm going to fix
and
this.
may I ask another? I'm going to ask questions. If I would say I have a line of the temperature and I do want to show the error band with standard deviations, for instance, would that be another layer? I'm still with the layering stuff in my mind. Okay, so that would be a layer. Yeah,
you would think about that. That's how you would sort of think about it. So what I generally advise is, it's just like the way I think about it is with a pen and paper. When you used to draw a chart in math class, you would have some square paper and a ruler, and think about each layer as something you would add to that chart. So whether it's an error bar or a label or something like that, you would encode those layers to match the things you want. And what's really cool, and we wouldn't have time to do it today, we can actually do transformations inside. And we're going to do a simple example of this now, but it's very, very, we can do way more complicated things. So we can do averages, we can do statistics, we can do, as long as the data is there for us to generate it from. We don't necessarily need to rely on DAX, but at the same time, we can build measures that give us that info too. We can mash up from our data model, but also from our data set within the visual. So we can do things like density plots, probability densities, or means, medians, and all kinds of things. What I'm going to do, I'll just proceed real quick. I'm just going to apply these changes. And what I see here, I'll just zoom that in a bit. We've got our temporal axis and our line, but it's not really doing anything, because what we haven't done is we haven't thought about the measure. So we're going to add a Y encoding, and we're going to map that to the mean temperature field, average temperature field. And we're going to add a new type for that one. And we've got a choice of nominal, which is like a category, ordinal, which is an ordered category. Temporal we've done, and quantitative is a measure. That's the kind of what we might expect on a line chart. So let's add quantitative. So that's not very exciting. It kind of does what we've asked. We've got data. It's currently running for this city from 1955-ish through to about about 2022, I think, from the last time I took this data. We can see there's some seasonality, but it's a really dense line. It doesn't really tell us anything. There's no real insights there. So what we need to think about now is how to actually start exploring. So what I can do, and this is a simple example of, there's a feature. When we hover over
another new feature.
Another new feature, they're just everywhere.
Yeah.
When we hover over language tokens, we now get this documentation in 1.7 that will pop up. And this is provided by the Vega people. We can actually get some really detailed information about what we're doing. So we can look into what encodings and types are. We get really rich documentation with links off to their documentation for more reading. This is going to help a lot. So currently, most people are, they've got it tough right now. They don't have access to this. They, like me, they usually have to keep the documentation open in another tab. So we're bridging that gap. So these may pop up from time to time, but that's what they are. So what we'll think about now is, let's try and get some better information density on here, not just dense stuff that doesn't make any sense, but let's actually make the use of space. So what we can do is, we've got a single date field, but we can break this out. We can use what's called time unit, and we can take the year component of that, and we'll apply those changes. And now we see that our data is kind of spread out a bit, but it looks a bit weird because it's a line, but it's non-continuous now because we've tried to aggregate it to the year. But Vega Lite can do this just by saying, strip it down to the year. What we could do instead of that line is we could maybe replace a different mark type, like a rectangle. And this now looks a little bit more continuous, but still very noisy. So instead, what we could do with that y-axis is, instead of taking the average temperature, in fact, actually, I'm going to detour, sorry. Let's make a bit more use of that average temperature field. Instead of the y, let's bind that to the color channel. And that's a quantitative field, so it's still got a continuous ramp. Let's apply that change. And we now start to see that we've already got a legend with a scale there, and it's encoded those years to match, which is kind of climate stripey. If we don't like that, we can add a scale. We can change the scale. So the scale is how the data is bound to the physical and logical values are bound. But we can introduce what's called a scheme, and we could use, say, blue-orange and run that. So now everything's looking pretty hot right now. That's because we're aggregating to the year, which is not very useful. But what we could think about now is, let's use that y-axis. And let's map the same field, the year-month field. Let's take the month of that. And let's use the nominal type for now, just to show this is the default if you don't supply it. We now get something that looks like a heat map, which is quite nice. We can now get our months down the y-axis, and we get our years along the x-axis. So we get this continuous flow, and we have this order that we understand with dates, January through to December, from top to bottom. And we can see that our coldest months are now in the middle of the year, which we know, but we can start to see some degree of how temperature goes over time based on years and months. So we've already got a nice improvement over our line.
With relatively limited code indeed. So if you know the structure, then
and we can resize if we don't like it, and Deneb will take care of the responsiveness.
Is it also interactive, Daniel? Right away?
At the moment, it isn't. I can jump, given time, I can jump straight ahead to that.
Please.
Because normally I would step through this in a pragmatic way. But what we'll do is I'll add in I'll just jump to the end. So I'm just going to copy
Okay.
paste something here, and we'll just explain what we're doing.
Yeah.
So interactivity by default is something you have to think about. This is one of the things now, if you're taking the reins, you've got to think about your user experience. So we can't make too many assumptions for you. So in the settings tab, we've got this interactivity section here, and we've got 4 options. We've got the tooltip handler, which is binding to Power BI tooltips. We've got the context menu enabled. So with those enabled by default, we can right click on a data point, for instance, and we get the context menu, and we can do include and exclude just like we would on a normal visual, because Deneb takes care of that for us. Deneb will resolve that to the data point, and it will display that on your behalf. Tooltips, again, are very, very simple. So I did say I'll copy paste, but I'll just show you this one manually. With tooltips, because we can have marks that represent all kinds of things, could be a label, could be just a straight line to draw any kind of shape. It doesn't necessarily mean data. We just need to tell Vega Lite which marks are eligible. So we can just put tooltip true on that mark. When we apply that change, see, what's nice about this visual is it shows me a nice summary, but it doesn't show me the detail. It shows me the month level. But I've got a report page tooltip now that if I hover over here, I get my monthly view by day.
Yeah.
So this is just a standard visual. There's no Deneb here. This is just a normal report page tooltip with a line chart with error bars.
Okay. Oh, do you already created that in the Power BI? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I already have I have a tooltip page that I already built, but Deneb will deal with this for you. So same kind of thing. It resolves the data point. Now the other two are the more complicated ones. The what we call cross highlight and cross filtering. That's when cross filtering is when you click a data point on your visual and it filters other visuals. And cross highlight is when you click a visual and it affects yours. Yeah. So what happens with those is there are certain conditions you have to look for and encode against. So when we click a data point, when I turn this cross filtering on, I'll just zoom in. We get an extra field now called selected. And this is what Deneb uses to manage the click state. So when I click on, say, this January data point here, we can see that changes to on. But you can see nothing's really happening. And that's because you now as a designer have to think about what that means for your users. What do I want the visual to do? And the problem with a completely new visual is there may not be an established pattern for it. So you have to think about what that means. It's not enough just to dim something out, possibly. It could be you have to move something, or there's some kind of thing you have to think about. So this is off by default because it's an extra bit. But what it means is you get some extra control. So for instance, if I just paste in this finished version, this is all very much the same. But what we've done is we've added an extra channel called opacity. And I'll apply this change. And what's happened now is everything is kind of dimmed out. If I just click on the background here, oh, we're having a problem. Okay, that's the demo gods for you. I'm going to change it back to the production one. Yeah. Because hang on, no, that's probably a different problem then. Let's have a look. No, that's absolutely not. Oh, hang on, I know what it is. No, it's not Deneb, it's Daniel. It's Daniel. So let's change it back to the new one.
The D and Deneb, right?
Yeah, D is for don't do anything Daniel does. You need to turn on the cross highlight values because this assumes cross highlight. Sorry. So when we turn on cross highlight, you have contextual values. So we have our original measure, and Power BI will send another value to tell it what the actual highlight is. And what I've done is I hadn't enabled that properly. So again, another reason why it needs to be considered. So what we've done down here is if we click this, it will do what we expect it to do. And I can control click to multi-select. Yeah. And we'll see what it does on the report page in just a moment. But what happens is with this opacity encoding, this is the transparency, well, how solid the mark is. What we're saying here is if the selected field, think of this as an if else. So we're putting a test in and we're using an or to say, if the field is off, so currently it's neutral, or the highlight field does not equal the original measure. So there's a structured object here, and there's also a language that Vega Lite has called expressions, which is very, very powerful. This just shows both possibilities. So we can do something more like JavaScript, or we can do something that's more JSON friendly. If either of these conditions are true, so we don't have a selection or the highlight doesn't match the original measure, set it to 10% opaque. Otherwise, it looks solid. So right now it's hitting this 1. Everything is solid. If I click this mark here,
that you get on and off in your table, and that's determined. Yeah.
So now we're able to conditionally show things. So this is a simple example, but you can then think about your user experience. And I'll just show you a more advanced example in just a second. If we go back to the report, the highlight scenario. So firstly, if we cross filter, we can see now that our chart on the right here is updating. And if we control click, that's working just like we'd expect. And if we click on, say, January on this chart, Deneb will now highlight the whole of January because that's what we asked it to do. So you can start thinking about your visual interacting with others and others interacting with yours, and start to build how the visual should look and feel. A more advanced example, not that we will be able to delve into the exact hows and whys, but this is an example I built for a storytelling with data competition about 1.5 years ago. And this is a simple. It's a simple data set. It's NASA published the difference from a baseline period for each month against the 1951 to 1980 average. How does each temperature for each month track against that? So what we've done here is these are 3 Deneb visuals. One is a radial plot that kind of looks like the trunk of a tree. So we start in 1880 and we go outwards, and we can see that this baseline is around the middle, but when we hover over a data point, we've added this custom interaction to highlight it. And if we look at this visual here, this scatter plot, which actually has a little pattern fill area to show the baseline period and a line for the top 10 warmest months. If we hover over a point, we actually expand the size of the circle. So we can start to build in interactivity that, this is kind of like a little zoom. You can get quite advanced with this. So we've got the tooltip. We see the distance. We tied this in with bookmarks. So if we look at the latest years, we get the top 10 moves dynamically, and we can start to sort of have a look at certain periods. And then
looks great. I like these colors. Yeah,
it's quite.
And is this all written with Vega Lite, Daniel?
Yeah, all 3 of these visuals. So it's 3.
Yeah.
So 3 visuals. This one here. This little micro chart here, which is the small multiples, and this scatter plot. The rest are bookmarks.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the bookmarks, it's like the normal bookmarks from Power BI that you make switches to different filter settings.
That's right. So Deneb will support bookmarks, and we can click on, say, Deneb can also do collect data points up. So when I click on a grouped mark, it can collect them up, and we can then highlight the values and see how they fit. So we can look at January across our data range. So this is.
So if people are new to this, Daniel, what's the learning curve that you see that people, because it is more coding, so you need to be a little bit code savvy.
You don't necessarily need to be code savvy, but you do need to start thinking differently about visuals. And as I say, the pen and paper paradigm is quite a good way of thinking about it. If I've got a canvas, how do I map my data to it? How would I draw it out? And the examples are probably one of the best places to start. If you've got an idea, have a look at how they work. Beyond that, we've got documentation on these sites. So the team provide really, really detailed documentation. So as I say, we've got a complete transform and algebra engine in here. You can do some very, very complicated things. And some of the visuals that are built make really good use of these things. We've got all the mark types. We've got how the encoding works. What we call view composition, so small multiples, layering, how you can start doing interactivity, all kinds of things. Beyond that,
I think I also saw on YouTube. Sorry to interrupt you. I saw also a session I think you did with ChatGPT in combination with this. I didn't have time to watch it, but I am curious to the conclusion. Was it able to load this library into ChatGPT and then ask a question and get the code in ChatGPT? Did it work?
We didn't get it in ChatGPT at the time. There's been a little bit of stuff happened since then. We have a community and resources page. It doesn't actually show that particular video, but we do have a section on AI where Eric Van Hook he's built an LLM that helps with Vega Lite specifically. And that link is available here, and there's a video where he goes through that. But I think the session you might be thinking of was, I think Greg Nash, who's an MVP in Australia, him and Gary Kolosko, also an Australian MVP, and myself tried to, help Greg. Well, Greg did it, and we kind of chipped in. We kind of heckled him a bit, but he did really, really well. But in terms of examples, there are people that, there's a few videos on here. So a much longer intro session. Other people. So Ben Ferry, Power BI guy, Power BI Audit Tips, Jose Escalante, a lot of Spanish language stuff. He's done a very comprehensive introduction in his learning journey. Lots of websites with examples. Kerry, Andre is amazing. Alexandra and Joanna, also amazing. Kerry builds some really great examples. She actually helped build some of the sample workbook examples, which I can quickly show. So the sample workbook you get with the app source listing, but lots of examples here. Kerry built these KPI designs. So she was coming up with the idea of using the same data to prototype lots of different ideas. So this is something that she's allowed us to share with the sample workbook. So how you can use the same data many different ways. It
gives you so much flexibility, because in the native ones, of course, we'll also have now 200 options per native visual, more and more and more. Still,
Andre
it's 200. This is limitless.
Andre has built the climate stripes. This is this is a single visual interactive swing chart. This really interesting plot here. Faceted poverty, I believe, age structure world population. Sorry, he has done a poverty one, I think. The COVID spiral, the infamous COVID spiral. This one is, I wish we could show the whole thing, but this is a population distribution over time by country. It doesn't quite show in this view, but this is a beautiful visual that he built. This is Deneb inside Power BI. This, I think, is one of the most ingenious, simple ideas I've ever seen, where he's got two dimensions together. He's got the average temperature as a little footnote underneath the bar chart, just as a nice little micro chart. Again, more spark lines. Andre is doing some really amazing stuff. I mean, there's a lot of people doing amazing stuff.
It's cool to see. So this is all available on the Deneb website.
Yes, it is. And if anybody finds examples, please tell me. I'll add them. Datavogue, Alexandra and Joanna, they do lots of examples with Deneb. A lot of IBCS inspired things. A lot of creativity. There's lots of inspiration around.
What's your first impression, Lonneke? Because for you, it's also the first time you see this.
I'm amazed. I really want to start learning it and start playing around. And so many options. Just very enthusiastic about it. Also a bit scared because still building up, even though it's very minimalistic code, I understand, but I'm not a technical person, so I really would have to. I'm always messing up with brackets and with commas, and
it's tricky. I mean, and some of the improvements we're making.
I don't know if the order of things is important, etc. Normally, I really
Order's not important. But we are doing in 1.7. We're improving the annotations that tell you where problems are.
Okay.
So again, in a few months, you'll have a version that will help guide you a little bit more. Which will help a lot. But what I can tell you is a lot of these people, Kerry, Ben, these are people that are self-professed non-technical people. They're very design-minded. They're very curious people, and they've got great imaginations. And they have really shown that you don't have to have a technical mind to learn. Once you get the paradigm, it makes sense. But I think it's fair. Some people may not find it's for them, and that's fine.
I like the challenge, definitely. But I was also wondering, like about Vega Lite. I do like that they have all this documentation on their website, but to just as a starting point, I'm really into just reading a book and having it next to me. And are there books that could help me learn this? Because I also understand that it's
I'm not aware of
changing
any
and-
at the moment. I think that's one of the hardest things with community tooling is we're really limited to what people have time to do. So for me, for instance, I only really have time to develop, and I do my best to document it as best as I can. There are people that are building videos to show their learning journeys, which I think could be good. I get about a book. I'm not aware of a book yet. There are a couple of, there's a good online course by the Austrian, I should say, visualization research repo that actually does a pretty good tutorial that works you through Vega Lite from the beginning.
Okay.
There are people in the community that are working on improving tutorials and the quality of training. So I'm partnering with a few people and helping with that at the moment. So it's not going to happen immediately because it's all dependent on our free time, but we will hopefully start to, again, there's more community projects. Now it's been a slow burn, but there are, like I say, the support folks are a great help because they're helping the community much more than I can. They're feeding into the product as well. And we've got people that are keen to contribute in other ways. So the sample workbook, for instance, will get improved hopefully this year. Like I say, hopefully some more training things, but we're trying to consolidate as much as we can in the meantime.
We are a training company, so if you have a training, let us know. We can publish it in the Netherlands.
Absolutely.
And we have to close it off, unfortunately, because it's very interesting all. And also in the comments, I see a lot of people having discussions and sharing links on how to solve specific problems. I didn't show them all, but have a look in the LinkedIn comments in this video, because people share a lot of interesting links like this also. And walkthrough series for beginners.
So Imran's doing a great series at the minute on
basically
from the beginning.
Oh yeah,
sounds good. Sounds like a starting point for me.
Thank you, Imran.
The previous link, David Bacci's examples are really this one. I mean, they're all good. But there are some great examples all over, and they're all linked on the page. So have a look, be inspired, and see what works. But there are some amazing examples out there.
There's a whole new world to discover.
Maybe I have one more question, going all the way back to the beginning. How you started, and you were asked by companies to create visuals for them, but you said, well, that's very hard to build up your business on it. Also money-wise. So maybe I'm too Dutch and too direct at this point. But now you're doing all this work for free. So I'm like,
I do.
Do you just offer like consultancy to help people build their visuals?
I have a day job. So I work with a company producing commercial visuals as well. On that's kind of my day job. This is really a labor of love. So it's basically done for free. I do the odd consulting gig if time allows, but mainly it's out there for people to use and to feedback. But for me, it's more about what the community can do with it. I mean, it would be lovely if I could support myself on Deneb, but it's more exciting that people are doing what they're doing with it. I'm genuinely getting the
thank you so much for doing it. Thank you.
Honestly, it's genuinely the community that are showing me the art of the possible, and that's probably the biggest inspiration. It sounds very funny, but it's true.
It's great that you do this, Daniel. And like I said in our pre-discussion, also in the Netherlands, I see it more and more on my timeline in the Netherlands also. So know that it is being picked up more and more here also. And this session hopefully also help people to get acquainted with it. And so Maurits, for example, sounds like a Dutch name. He says, looks great. It's going to be a fine long Easter weekend. So he's going to be playing with Deneb for sure.
Hoping for a lot of rain and cold, so there is more time to spend behind the computer.
Well, no.
I hope you enjoy, but we don't get you too hooked, and maybe get some fresh air in there. But no, I genuinely hope you enjoy it. It's how I started was very similar. I just found the languages really useful, and I was really empowered, and I just want to help people do
Is
that.
there one final, because then we need to close off, but is there one final thing you can share on the new version, just as a teaser for people to get?
I'm trying to think what else we've got in this build. I mean, there's a great feature that would be way too crazy to show now. That's for more advanced things. But I think one of the things that, because I spend a lot of time in this and us developers really enjoy, and I can't do much about the main window, and we haven't wired up the UI yet, but there will be the option to have a dark theme.
Oh wow!
So
people will love that always. They always cheer.
And I'll just make a quick observation on this.
That's nice.
This elephant in the room here. This is not dark, and the reason for this is because that's what the report canvas looks like. Now, we don't want to make that dark because that's not what your users will see. If you want to, we have the option to turn that off. So if you really want to have it all the way dark, I mean, if your report background isn't dark, I mean, if you set the background of your report to be a dark report, that would come through.
It takes over your real background. And what if you have an image as your background in your report? Will that also somehow show
that won't come through? Power BI doesn't send that in this view.
Okay.
So no, not in this view, but I mean, if it may change when you go back to the report, but this is really just a way that because when I do consulting, I spend a couple of hours inside here and it makes a real difference. So I had to do some work in the last couple of releases to make the architecture work like this, but now, yes, dark mode will be coming as well.
Cool. Yeah. And you showed me also before that there will be commenting options more, right?
I forgot all about that.
Yeah, I'm here to remind you.
That's the most important thing. Because you can't comment in JSON. You can't comment in JSON, and what people want to do is they want to be able to document and debug. So let's say, for instance, we want to take off. One of the cases is we might want to take out the Y encoding just to see what it looks like. So now we can comment that out and run our visual with comments.
Cool.
And we can put them back, or we can say, this is the Y-axis.
Documentation. Yeah.
We can document.
Yeah.
So we can debug, we can document, and we can also do block comments as well.
Great.
Oops, when we type them right. And there are hotkeys for this, so I can take this and block comment that.
Do it in one go. Amazing. So there's something to look forward to. When will it be roughly out? You think the new version?
That's the question, isn't it?
Exactly. When you have time.
I don't have have the shareholders. My intention is to have it done in maybe 2 months' time, but it depends on my availability and testing. So what you see here is quite stable, but one of the challenges with the comment support is we have to change the way templates work. So I'm currently working on that right now. So you can export to a template. I don't know if this is going to work. Fingers crossed. Okay, at least the screen came up.
Yeah.
You can build a template to export for your users, and we just have to make sure the comments are supported in there. So that's my current focus. Once that's done, we'll be looking at engaging the community for testing like we did with 1.6, and we'll go through bug fixing, and it's however long that takes really. But I'm aiming for about end of May, early June, but I'll keep announcing.
People should follow you, and then we'll get the update.
Absolutely.
And we keep on. This will be a record length episode. Doesn't matter. Marianne van der Brink, because I do want to include her question. Parameter fields, is that possible soon? Apparently, she has been using it a little bit already.
Field parameters are difficult for reasons that are probably quite tedious to talk about. But they don't work how things like calculation groups work. Because they're a visual level change, they mess with the data set, and there's nothing we can really use to know if something is a field parameter. I've asked Microsoft for some additional support there. We'll see if that happens. There are a couple of, I will see if I can, there is a GitHub issue where we're talking about field parameter support. The short answer is not yet. But I would like
it's
to.
Also not.
But
that's also an answer.
That's an answer. Yeah.
It has to be done properly, and there are some hacks on there that will work. use at your own discretion. But I will go through, and because I'll be able to look at the chat afterwards. Hopefully, I'll put the link on there for the person that asked that question.
That's appreciated. Next week we're also, of course, live, and we're going to be talking about something else: SAP and Power BI. How can you combine it? Because that's a lot of people, are fighting with that. It is not always nicely communicating with each other. So Wessel will share some best practices on how you can make it work. What are preconditions? How can it work? So if you're interested, that will be in Dutch, unfortunately. But that's next week, Thursday at 4:00 again. So thank you again, Daniel, and thank you also, Lonneke, for joining again.
Yeah.
And for everyone who is joining us today and watch this show. Have a nice day, and see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.